Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Nine, and thank you for joining us. President Trump is furious over intelligence officials warning lawmakers that Russia's again meddling in the 2020 election to improve his chances. The House received a briefing last week about new meddling efforts, and lawmakers learned about the potential threat one day before the president did. That caused Mr. Trump to, quote, blow his stack. But the Kremlin denies any involvement. Russian President Vladimir Putin has dismissed all accusations of election interference. The president's also rejecting these findings from his own intelligence officials. On Twitter, he called it, quote, another misinformation campaign being launched by Democrats. Well, this all comes as the president makes major changes to his intelligence community. Earlier this week, acting director of national intelligence, Joseph Maguire, was removed from his post. Maguire testified in the House impeachment inquiry back in September after allegations that he illegally withheld the whistleblower complaint on Ukraine. Well, the president replaced Maguire with Richard Grenell. He's a U.S. ambassador to Germany. But Grenell will only be serving as acting intel chief, which, according to U.S. law, means he needs to be replaced in 210 days. The president is considering names for the permanent role. That includes House Judiciary ranking member Doug Collins. However, the congressman says he's not interested in the job because he's running for Senate in Georgia. Well, for the latest on the intelligence community, I want to bring in Paula, Reid, and Herridge. Paula's a CBS News White House correspondent. Catherine's a CBS News senior investigative correspondent. Catherine, I want to start with that briefing. What more do we know about the intelligence on Russia?
Well, Rena, good afternoon. My contacts are reporting some with direct knowledge of that briefing that lawmakers were told by the briefers that they assessed that Russia was meddling in the upcoming election and that the goal was to help President Trump in 2020. And one lawmaker specifically said, we need to see or know about the underlying evidence and whether the briefers had what's called SIGINT or signals intelligence. These are things like telephone intercepts. And I'm told the briefers had none to offer at that time. And the reason that matters is that signals intelligence, or SIGINT, is often used as the foundation to understand the intent of the adversary. So what we know about this briefing and the events at that briefing is also consistent with other reporting we've received here at CBS News from other sources who describe the briefing as offering weak or thin intelligence to support these assessments, Rena.
You know, Catherine, just a few days ago, there were 5 top officials, including Attorney General William Barr, the FBI Director Christopher Wray. They wrote an op-ed in USA Today, and they said this. I'm going to quote directly here. We have yet to identify any activity designed to prevent voting or change votes. However, we remain watchful of any malicious activities from cyber criminals and from foreign actors like Russia, China, and Iran. So, Catherine, is the intelligence briefing in the House at odds with what these top officials are saying publicly?
Well, what we've known for some months is that Russia continues to run these information or what they call malign foreign influence operations that are designed to amplify issues that divide Americans. And the FBI Director Christopher Wray, who was also one of the authors of that op-ed, testified to these issues earlier this month. And I think it goes, Rena, to a fundamental, misunderstanding of the Russian objectives with these information operations. I've talked to current and former intelligence officials, and I've been working and reporting in this space for 2 decades. And they tell me that Russia and other adversaries, their goal is to undermine confidence in American institutions and American democracy. So the office of the president, law enforcement and the Justice Department, the integrity of the voting system. So it's about undermining confidence. It's not so much about favoring one party or one candidate over another.
That says so much. Paula, I want to turn to you as well and get you to weigh in. How is the president responding to all of this?
Well, Rena, he was not happy that he had to hear this off the Hill, that he was not given a heads up that this briefing would be conducted. And he was especially angry that he believes now Democrats will be able to weaponize this information against him in the general election. For the first 2 years of his administration, he was under scrutiny in the special counsel's investigation into Russian meddling. This is a sore subject for the president. We have to look back at what the special counsel said he uncovered. He testified that, in fact, he believed it would be accurate based on his investigation that Russia wanted to help President Trump win the election and that they committed federal crimes in order to help President Trump. Now, the president was especially irritated that Adam Schiff was in this briefing because Schiff led a lot of the Hill's investigations to look into any connection between the Trump campaign and Russia. Now, Adam Schiff kept claiming that he had evidence of collusion, but he's never been able to present this evidence or be able to prove there was any cooperation between the Trump campaign and Russia. But the president is especially concerned that Schiff would seize on what was shared during this briefing and use it against him in 2020. Today on Twitter, the president's already trying to get out ahead of that, arguing that this is all part of another, quote, misinformation campaign being launched by Democrats in Congress.
Catherine, I'm curious, how are lawmakers on Capitol Hill reacting? Do you get the sense, do Democrats and Republicans share the same concerns about the briefing, or are they both divided?
Well, I think Republicans and Democrats share concerns about any kind of foreign influence or meddling in the elections. In this particular episode, I think it really divides along party lines. Democrats see the actions of the president and characterize it as more evidence that he's not serious about foreign election meddling. Republicans see this latest episode really through a political lens, and it's an effort to really undermine the president. Those close to the president have told me that when he sees stories about election interference, he often can take it very personally. He sees this as an effort to undermine the legitimacy of his victory in 2016. And I would also emphasize, because we've heard this from multiple sources here at CBS News, that the decision to remove the Director of National Intelligence, so the man who oversees the intelligence agencies, Mr. McGuire, from that position, was not at all connected to this briefing on the Hill last week.
You know, I'm also curious, Paula, we just heard Catherine mention it's not connected there, but the fact of naming Richard Grenell, is there a connection there? They had this House briefing. Grenell then gets appointed to this. Is there any connection to that move?
Well, as Catherine noted, White House officials insist he was on his way out anyway, and there was no connection. But of course, the timing coming just a few days after the president was furious about this briefing. I'll leave it up to your viewers to decide if they believe the White House officials to say there is no connection. But also, the fact is that now they're saying that Grenell is merely temporary. He will not be in there for an extended period of time. The president says he intends to nominate a permanent director of national intelligence within a matter of weeks. Now, the first name that he floated, Representative Doug Collins from Georgia, he said this is not a job that he would accept. You can hardly blame the guy if you look at what whoever takes on this job will be up against. There have been some other names that have been floated, but so far my sources are telling me that there's a small group. The president is keeping it pretty close to the vest, and we may not have actually heard the final pick just yet.
All right. Catherine, I'm also curious, you report that one of Grenell's top aides, Kash Patel, who was a really controversial figure on the National Security Council, you had an exclusive interview with him. Who is he exactly? What did he say? And what do you read into this move for intelligence agencies under a Grenell leadership?
So Kash Patel was the first Republican staffer to really identify what were problems with these 4 surveillance warrants targeting a Trump campaign aide in 2016 and 2017. And his concerns about the surveillance warrants were borne out and shown to be true in Inspector General Michael E. Horowitz's report in December of last year that found 17 inaccuracies and omissions that related to those surveillance warrants. 2 have already been found to be defective, and we're waiting for an outstanding review by the Justice Department on the others. So Patel has really become a lightning rod in a political sense. Based on my reporting here at CBS, what I can tell you is that the expectation is that Grenell and Patel are only going to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence on a temporary basis. And part of their mandate, I was told, is, quote, to clean house and to do a top-to-bottom review of that agency. So the systems, the processes, the departments, because for context, the ODNI was set up after 9/11 to try and prevent the kind of stovepiping of intelligence that led to that terrorist attack. But when it began, in my memory is 2005, it was relatively small for a government agency, about 200 people. My contacts report it's mushroomed to over 2,000. So Grenell and Patel have been given a mandate to essentially trim it back in a very significant way, but not to stay there on a permanent basis.
All right. And Paula, if Russians are meddling in the 2020 election, as the intelligence chiefs say, has the White House spoken about any plans to address it?
Well, the government has been trying to push back against any foreign adversaries' efforts to meddle in our democracy. There's lots of different ways they can do that. We're talking about social media, we're talking about the actual infrastructure of voting itself, and then foreign money. Now, when it comes to social media, the government has been trying to partner with some private companies, making it harder for those platforms to be abused. But ultimately, Russia specifically appears to be undeterred by American efforts to thwart them. They've tried to get a little more creative this time. For example, on Facebook in 2016, they would often impersonate Americans. This time around, they're just trying to get real Americans to share disinformation. They're also trying to work from servers here in the U.S. because they know it is harder to surveil those. Now, in terms of the infrastructure, the actual pen and pencil, the ballot, the machines that folks use when they go to the polls, there is an argument that was made in the previous administration, President Trump has made it too, that you can't hack a pencil. So maybe we should just continue to rely on papers and pencils, or if people use machines, keep some sort of paper record. So if there is any kind of doubt, you can go back and do another tally. There have been some bills presented to make that mandatory, but ultimately that really is a local government issue. And finally, there's the issue of foreign money in elections. A lot of folks forget about this. A short time ago, the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, two of his associates were charged with illegally funneling foreign money into U.S. campaigns. So that is another concern, another way that foreign adversaries could try to influence elections, primaries, campaigns, really any form of distrust they can sow here in U.S. democracy. That's good for them.
Paula, Reid, Herridge, I want to thank you both for joining us.